There is a pain the Buddha spoke of that feels quieter than loss. It is the pain of staying where you are no longer chosen. The Buddha never taught us to beg for belonging. He taught us to see clearly and to walk away without hatred. If your heart feels tired without knowing why, this teaching is for you. Attachment disguised as love. The Buddha taught that suffering does not begin when something leaves us. It begins much earlier, at the moment we start believing that our peace depends on another person's choice. When someone no longer chooses you, and you remain emotionally tied to them, the mind creates a subtle form of attachment that feels like love, but slowly turns into dissatisfaction. This attachment is not born from kindness or connection, but from fear, fear of emptiness, fear of change, fear of being alone with oneself. In Buddhist understanding, attachment is the act of asking impermanent things to provide permanent comfort. People change, feelings shift, and intentions fade, yet the attached mind continues to hope that what has already altered will return to how it once was. This hope keeps the heart restless. You begin waiting for messages, reading meaning into silence, and offering effort where none is returned. The Buddha described this state as a mind that has lost its balance, leaning toward what no longer supports it. True love, according to Buddhist wisdom, is spacious and free. It does not demand, chase, or negotiate for presence. When love becomes anxious and heavy, it is no longer love but clinging. Clinging drains inner peace because it ties your well-being to another person's decisions, which you cannot control. The Buddha encouraged us to observe this clearly, not with judgment, but with honesty. When you see attachment as it is, you realize that staying where you are not chosen is not an act of compassion, but an act of self-forgetting. Letting go, then, is not a loss. It is the moment awareness returns. It is the mind releasing a burden it was never meant to carry. When attachment loosens, dignity rises, and the heart becomes light again. This is the first step on the path the Buddha showed, the path from clinging to clarity, from silent suffering to inner freedom. The ego sets need to be chosen. The Buddha taught that much of human suffering is not created by events themselves, but by the stories the ego builds around them. When someone does not choose you and pain arises, the pain often does not come from the separation alone. It comes from the wounded sense of self that asks, "Why was I not enough?" This question does not belong to wisdom. It belongs to the ego, which seeks validation, recognition, and reassurance from outside. In Buddhist teaching, the ego is not an enemy, but it is also not a guide. It constantly compares, measures, and resists reality. When you remain attached to those who do not choose you, the ego quietly takes control, convincing you that persistence will earn love, or that endurance will prove worthiness. The mind then turns suffering into a task, believing that if it stays long enough, something will change. The Buddha warned that this belief binds us more tightly to dissatisfaction because it keeps us struggling against what already is. The ego dislikes acceptance because acceptance feels like defeat. Yet the Buddha described acceptance as clarity, not weakness. To accept that someone has not chosen you is not to lower your value, but to release the illusion that your value was ever decided by them. When the ego is in charge, it seeks to repair its image by holding on, explaining, or trying harder. But this effort only deepens attachment and clouds insight. The mind becomes restless, constantly revisiting memories, imagining alternative outcomes, and resisting the present moment. Through mindful observation, the Buddha taught us to notice how the ego tightens around rejection. When you watch carefully, you see that the suffering is maintained not by the other person, but by your refusal to let reality be complete as it is. The moment the ego loosens its grip, the heart feels an unfamiliar spaciousness. This space is not loneliness. It is freedom from the need to be affirmed. Letting go of those who do not choose you is therefore an act of wisdom. It is the moment you stop asking the world to confirm your worth and begin resting in awareness itself. The Buddha taught that when the mind no longer struggles to be chosen, it becomes steady, dignified, and peaceful. From this steadiness, genuine connection can arise, not from hunger, but from wholeness. Non-attachment is the doorway to inner freedom. The Buddha taught that freedom does not come from controlling life, but from understanding its nature. Everything that arises is subject to change, including relationships, affection, and the way people see us. When someone no longer chooses you, the mind often reacts with resistance, trying to hold on to what once felt stable. Yet the Buddha explained that this resistance is precisely what turns change into suffering. Non-attachment is not the rejection of love. It is the deep understanding that love cannot survive when it is bound by fear. In Buddhist teaching, non-attachment means allowing things to come and go without losing yourself in the process. When you stay attached to someone who does not choose you, your awareness becomes narrowed. You begin living in memory and expectation, rather than in the present moment. The mind revisits past kindnesses, hoping they will return, and imagines future reconciliation as a way to escape discomfort. The Buddha described this as a wandering mind, unable to rest because it refuses to accept impermanence. Non-attachment asks for courage. It requires the willingness to feel the emptiness that follows release, without immediately trying to fill it. Many people avoid letting go because they fear the quiet that comes afterward. Yet the Buddha taught that this quiet is not emptiness in a negative sense. It is openness. When attachment falls away, the heart becomes spacious, and in that space peace naturally arises. This peace does not depend on being wanted or chosen. It comes from being fully present with what is. The practice of non-attachment also protects compassion. When you cling, love becomes mixed with expectation, and compassion turns into bargaining. You give not freely, but in hope of return. The Buddha taught that true compassion has no demand. It wishes well without insisting on closeness. By letting go of those who do not choose you, you prevent resentment from growing and allow goodwill to remain pure. As non-attachment deepens, something subtle but powerful happens. The mind stops chasing, and awareness turns inward. You begin to see that your sense of self does not need to be confirmed by another's presence. The Buddha taught that this realization is a form of awakening. It is the understanding that peace was never held by another person. It was always available within a clear and steady mind. Letting go, then, is not an ending. It is a return to balance, to dignity, and to the quiet strength that arises when you no longer cling to what has already moved on. This is the freedom the Buddha pointed toward, not the freedom to escape pain, but the freedom to no longer be ruled by it. Remaining where you are not chosen becomes self-suffering. The Buddha taught that suffering is not something imposed upon us by others. It is something the mind creates when it resists reality. When someone does not choose you, the reality is already complete. Yet suffering begins when the mind refuses to accept this completeness and insists on rewriting what is. Remaining where you are not chosen is not merely an emotional difficulty. It is a form of self-suffering that grows quietly over time, often unnoticed until the heart feels exhausted and heavy. In Buddhist understanding, self-suffering arises when the mind acts against wisdom. The wisdom sees impermanence, change, and the natural ending of conditions. The mind, however, driven by desire and fear, tries to preserve what has already begun to dissolve. When you stay where you are not chosen, you begin living in contradiction to truth. Outwardly, you appear present. Inwardly, you are constantly adjusting yourself, suppressing needs, and lowering expectations in order to remain. This inner bending is what the Buddha described as dukkha, a deep, unsatisfactory strain of being. The longer one stays in such a condition, the more the sense of self erodes. The mind starts measuring its worth through small signs of attention, brief kindness, or imagined possibilities. Hope becomes fragmented, appearing in moments and disappearing in silence. The Buddha warned that hope rooted in attachment does not nourish the heart, it confuses it. It keeps the mind suspended between past and future, unable to settle into the present moment where peace resides. This kind of staying is often misunderstood as patience or loyalty, yet the Buddha distinguished clearly between patience that arises from wisdom and endurance that arises from fear. Wise patience is steady and peaceful. Fear-based endurance is tense and self-denying. When you remain where you are not chosen, the endurance required slowly disconnects you from your own inner truth. You begin abandoning what feels honest in order to maintain what feels familiar. The Buddha taught that familiarity without clarity leads only to further suffering. When awareness deepens, a quiet insight appears. You realize that no one is harming you by not choosing you. The harm arises when you choose to stay against your own knowing. This realization is not harsh. It is liberating. It returns responsibility to where it belongs, not in blame but in understanding. The Buddha taught that freedom begins when responsibility is accepted with compassion toward oneself. Letting go at this stage is not an act of anger or finality. It is the mind realigning with truth. It is the moment you stop asking life to be different and begin allowing it to unfold as it already has. From this alignment, dignity returns. The heart softens, not because it has been rewarded, but because it is no longer in conflict with reality. This is the deeper peace the Buddha pointed toward, the peace that arises not from being chosen, but from choosing clarity over suffering, right effort, and the sacred use of your life energy. The Buddha taught that every human life is carried forward by energy, and that this energy is neither infinite nor careless. It moves where the mind directs it, and it shapes the quality of our suffering or our peace. When we give our energy without awareness, especially to those who do not choose us, we slowly exhaust the very force that sustains clarity, joy, and dignity. This exhaustion is not always dramatic. Often it arrives quietly as heaviness, confusion, and a sense of being inwardly drained. In Buddhist teaching, this misuse of energy is not considered a moral failure, but a lack of right understanding. The Buddha introduced the concept of right effort to guide us toward wise engagement with life. Right effort is not about doing more, it is about doing what leads away from suffering and toward liberation. When you continue investing emotional energy into someone who does not choose you, the effort may feel noble, but it is not right effort. It does not lead to peace, it leads to depletion. The mind often confuses persistence with virtue. It believes that staying, enduring, and continuing to give will eventually transform rejection into acceptance. Yet the Buddha was clear that effort must be aligned with reality. When effort is applied against the truth of impermanence, it becomes struggle. This struggle consumes energy without producing wisdom. You may feel busy emotionally, constantly thinking, hoping, and adjusting, but inwardly you are moving nowhere. The Buddha compared unwise effort to pouring water into a broken vessel. No matter how much is given, nothing is retained. When someone does not choose you, their capacity to receive your energy has already closed. Continuing to pour yourself into that space does not deepen connection, it deepens imbalance. Over time, this imbalance turns into fatigue of the heart. You begin to feel tired, not because life is demanding, but because your energy is flowing in a direction that cannot nourish you. Right effort begins with restraint, not action. It asks you to pause and observe where your energy is going. Are your thoughts returning again and again to someone who has already moved on? Are your emotions revolving around imagined conversations, explanations, or future possibilities that have no ground in the present. The Buddha taught that when the mind repeatedly feeds such patterns, it strengthens attachment and weakens awareness. Right effort interrupts this cycle gently, not by force but by understanding. Letting go of people who do not choose you is an act of energy conservation at the deepest level. It is not withdrawal from love, it is the redirection of life force back to its rightful home. When energy returns to the self, the mind slowly regains steadiness. You begin to sleep more deeply, breathe more freely, and experience moments of calm that had been absent. These are signs the Buddha pointed to as indicators that suffering is loosening its grip. The Buddha also taught that energy shaped by craving becomes restless, while energy shaped by wisdom becomes peaceful. When you crave being chosen, your energy becomes sharp and anxious, always reaching outward. When you release this craving, energy settles inward, becoming stable and clear. This clarity allows you to see relationships as they truly are, not as you wish them to be. From this seeing arises discernment, which protects the heart without hardening it. Another aspect of right effort is knowing when to stop. In worldly thinking, stopping is often seen as giving up. In Buddhist wisdom, stopping is often the beginning of freedom. The Buddha encouraged his students to abandon unwholesome states of mind, not through resistance, but through non-feeding. When you stop feeding attachment with attention, stories, and hope, it gradually weakens. This is how release happens naturally, without violence toward the self. As energy withdraws from unchosen spaces, it does not disappear. It becomes available for cultivation. The Buddha taught that freed energy should be directed toward practices that stabilize the mind: mindfulness, kindness, reflection, and understanding. When energy is no longer wasted on seeking validation, it strengthens awareness. Awareness in turn becomes the foundation for peace. This peace is not dependent on relationships. It exists independently, steady and quiet. Right effort also restores self-respect. When you no longer chase what does not choose you, you send a silent message to the mind: my peace matters. This message reshapes your inner posture. You begin to sit differently in your own life. You are no longer leaning forward in anticipation or backward in regret. You are upright, present, and grounded. The Buddha taught that this inner posture is essential for liberation, because a mind that stands upright cannot easily be pushed into suffering. Over time, the redirection of energy changes the way relationships appear. You no longer approach others from lack, but from fullness. When connection arises, it feels light and mutual. When it ends, it does not collapse you. The Buddha taught that balanced energy allows love to exist without bondage. You can care deeply without losing yourself, and you can release without bitterness. This balance is the fruit of right effort. Ultimately, letting go of those who do not choose you is a profound spiritual discipline. It trains the mind to honor reality, protect energy, and rest in awareness. The Buddha did not promise that this practice would always feel comfortable at first. He promised that it would lead to peace. And peace, in Buddhist teaching, is not an emotion. It is the absence of inner struggle. When you stop pouring your life force into places where it cannot return, you begin to feel whole again. Not because someone chose you, but because you finally chose wisdom over exhaustion. This is right effort as the Buddha taught it: quiet, firm, and deeply compassionate toward oneself. Emptiness is not loss. It is the return to truth. The Buddha taught that one of the greatest misunderstandings of the human mind is its fear of emptiness. When something ends, when someone leaves, when a bond dissolves, the mind immediately labels what remains as loss. Yet in Buddhist wisdom, emptiness is not the absence of meaning, it is the absence of illusion. When you let go of people who do not choose you, what you encounter is not abandonment, but space, and space is where clarity begins. The fear of emptiness arises because the mind has learned to define itself through attachment. When someone was present, choosing you, responding to you, the mind quietly borrowed identity from that connection. It said, "I am someone because I am wanted." When that choosing ends, the borrowed identity collapses and the mind panics. The Buddha taught that this panic is not evidence of love lost, but evidence of self misunderstood. What collapses is not you. It is a false structure built on impermanent conditions. In Buddhist teaching, emptiness does not mean nothingness. It means freedom from fixed form. Everything that arises does so dependent on conditions, and when conditions change, forms dissolve. When a person stops choosing you, the condition that sustained the relationship has already changed. Emptiness simply reveals this truth. To resist emptiness is to resist reality. To allow emptiness is to align with the way things actually are. The mind that clings fears silence. When there is no message, no reassurance, no familiar presence, the mind rushes to fill the gap with thought. It revisits memories, imagines conversations, replays moments of closeness, and constructs stories of what might still be possible. The Buddha taught that this mental activity is not healing, it is avoidance. It keeps the mind busy so it does not have to rest in the open space that follows letting go. Yet it is precisely this space that contains the seed of liberation. When emptiness is allowed, something unexpected happens. At first, there is discomfort, because the mind is no longer distracted. It begins to feel the rawness of being present without support. But as time passes, the discomfort softens and awareness expands. The Buddha taught that when the mind stops grasping, it naturally settles. In this settling, a deeper peace emerges, not the peace of satisfaction, but the peace of non-resistance. Emptiness also reveals how much effort was being spent maintaining attachment. When you stop reaching out emotionally to someone who does not choose you, energy returns. The mind becomes quieter, less reactive. You begin to notice how much of your inner world was organized around anticipation and disappointment. Without this cycle, attention becomes available for direct experience, breathing, walking, seeing, being. The Buddha taught that this return to direct experience is the foundation of awakening. Another truth emptiness reveals is impermanence. When you sit with the absence left by letting go, you begin to see that feelings rise and fall on their own. Sadness appears, lingers and dissolves. Longing comes, weakens and fades. The Buddha taught that observing impermanence directly loosens attachment at its root. You no longer believe that any feeling defines you or will last forever. This understanding brings immense relief. Many people fear that letting go will make them cold or detached from life. The Buddha taught the opposite. When attachment dissolves, sensitivity increases. You feel more clearly, not less. But you are no longer overwhelmed by feeling. Emptiness makes room for compassion that is not entangled with need. You can wish someone well without wanting them back. You can remember without clinging. This is the maturity of the heart. Emptiness also restores dignity. When you are no longer trying to be chosen, the subtle desperation leaves the body. Your posture changes, your presence steadies, and your interactions become simpler. You no longer lean toward others for validation. The Buddha taught that this uprightness of being is a sign of inner freedom. It is the quiet confidence of someone who no longer negotiates their worth. As emptiness deepens, the sense of self begins to soften. You notice that the I who was rejected, ignored, or left behind is not solid. It is a collection of thoughts, feelings, and reactions arising and passing away. The Buddha taught that seeing this clearly weakens the illusion of a permanent self that can be harmed by another's choice. When this illusion loosens, suffering loosens with it. In this space, A new kind of peace becomes possible, not the peace of getting what you want, but the peace of no longer needing reality to be different. This peace does not depend on relationships, outcomes, or approval. It arises from understanding. The Buddha described this as a mind that has stopped arguing with life. Letting go of people who do not choose you is therefore not an act of loss, but an act of return. You return to yourself, to presence, to the simple truth of being alive without conditions. Emptiness becomes fullness because it is no longer resisted. What once felt like abandonment becomes openness. What once felt like rejection becomes release. This is why the Buddha taught that emptiness is liberating. It removes the false supports so that true stability can be discovered. When nothing is clung to, nothing can be taken away. When nothing is demanded, nothing can disappoint. This does not make life smaller, it makes it vast. In this vastness, you begin to walk more lightly. You no longer chase what does not choose you, because you see clearly that your peace was never held there. It was always waiting in the space you were afraid to enter. This is the wisdom of emptiness, not a teaching of loss, but a teaching of freedom. Choosing yourself is the end of inner conflict. The Buddha taught that liberation does not arrive when life finally gives us what we want. It arrives when the mind no longer argues with what is choosing yourself. In Buddhist understanding is not an act of selfishness or withdrawal from the world. It is the end of inner conflict. It is the moment the mind stops splitting itself between what it feels and what it believes it must endure. When you let go of people who do not choose you, and you finally choose yourself instead, something profound shifts. The struggle ends, not because everything is resolved, but because the mind is no longer divided. For a long time, the mind believes that choosing oneself means closing the heart, becoming distant, or hardening against pain. The Buddha taught the opposite. A heart that is forced to stay where it is not chosen gradually hardens out of exhaustion. A heart that chooses itself softens because it is no longer under threat. Choosing yourself is not about rejecting others. It is about ending self-abandonment. The Buddha described self-abandonment as one of the most subtle forms of suffering because it is often mistaken for patience, loyalty, or love. When you stay with someone who does not choose you, a quiet inner split occurs. One part of you knows the truth. Another part of you refuses to accept it. This division drains energy, clarity, and peace. The Buddha taught that suffering thrives in division and dissolves in wholeness. Choosing yourself reunites the divided mind. You no longer suppress your knowing, and you no longer betray your own clarity in order to remain connected. Choosing yourself begins with honesty. Not harsh honesty, but gentle truthfulness. You acknowledge what is present without demanding that it change. You see that someone has stepped away emotionally, mentally, or spiritually, and instead of chasing or shrinking, you allow that distance to exist. The Buddha taught that allowing is far more powerful than forcing. When you allow reality to be as it is, the mind relaxes. In that relaxation, wisdom arises naturally. As this choice deepens, the need to explain yourself fades. You stop rehearsing conversations that will never happen. You stop hoping for recognition that may never come. The mind becomes quieter because it is no longer seeking closure from another person. The Buddha taught that true closure does not come from answers. It comes from understanding. Understanding ends the question altogether. Choosing yourself also restores dignity. Dignity in Buddhist terms is not pride or self-importance. It is the natural uprightness of a mind that is no longer begging for acceptance. When you choose yourself, your actions slow down. Your words become fewer but more sincere. Your presence becomes grounded. Others may feel this shift without being able to name it. The Buddha taught that inner alignment expresses itself outwardly without effort. Another transformation occurs at the level of compassion. When you no longer cling, compassion becomes clean. You can care without expectation. You can wish someone well without needing their presence. You no longer confuse love with endurance. The Buddha taught that compassion without wisdom leads to suffering, but compassion guided by wisdom leads to peace. Choosing yourself is the moment compassion and wisdom come into balance. The fear many people carry is that choosing themselves will lead to loneliness. The Buddha taught that loneliness does not come from being alone, it comes from being disconnected from oneself. When you choose yourself, you reconnect inwardly. You become present with your breath, your body, your awareness. This presence fills the space that attachment once occupied. It does not replace relationships, but it removes dependence on them for wholeness. As this inner connection strengthens, relationships change naturally. You no longer approach others from lack or hunger. You meet them from completeness. When someone chooses you, the connection feels mutual and light. When someone does not, the absence does not collapse you. The Buddha taught that this balance is the sign of maturity on the path. You are no longer pulled or pushed by circumstances. You move with understanding. Choosing yourself also brings an end to comparison. When you are not chosen, the mind often looks outward, wondering who replaced you or what you lacked. The Buddha taught that comparison is a thief of peace, because it is based on illusion. Every being walks their own path shaped by causes and conditions. Choosing yourself dissolves the need to measure your worth against another's choices. You see clearly that worth was never assigned externally. At a deeper level, choosing yourself reveals the truth of non-self. You begin to see that the identity that felt rejected was never solid. It was a collection of feelings, memories, and expectations arising in awareness. When these are seen clearly, the sense of a wounded self softens. The Buddha taught that suffering depends on a fixed sense of self. When that fixation loosens, suffering loses its foundation. This does not mean pain never arises again. The Buddha never promised a life without pain. He promised a mind that would no longer be ruled by it. When sadness appears, you allow it. When longing arises, you observe it. But you do not build a home inside these states. You let them pass, knowing they are not who you are. Choosing yourself gives you this stability. Over time, this choice becomes natural. You no longer think of it as letting go. You simply stop reaching where nothing is returned. The mind rests more often in silence. The body carries less tension. The heart feels spacious. The Buddha taught that this simplicity is the fruit of the path. Not excitement, not constant happiness, but ease. In this ease, gratitude appears. You become grateful not only for those who stayed, but also for those who left. Those who did not choose you taught you impermanence. They taught you where attachment lived. They showed you the places where you needed to return to yourself. The Buddha taught that every experience, when met with awareness, becomes a teacher. Choosing yourself does not end connection with the world, it ends dependence on it. You still love, still care, still open your heart, but you do so without chains. You no longer ask others to complete you. You meet them as whole beings, meeting another whole being. This is the love the Buddha pointed toward, free, grounded, and unburdened. When you choose yourself, you are not standing against anyone. You are standing with truth. You are standing with clarity. You are standing with the path that leads away from suffering. The Buddha taught that this standing is liberation in daily life, not something distant or mystical, but something practiced in ordinary moments, again and again. And so, letting go of people who do not choose you becomes the final act of kindness, not only toward them, but toward yourself. You stop forcing what cannot be sustained. You stop sacrificing peace for familiarity. You stop mistaking endurance for love. You choose awareness. you choose dignity. You choose the end of inner conflict. This is the final lesson the Buddha left us with. When you stop abandoning yourself, suffering has nowhere to live. The Buddha never asked us to cling to what causes suffering. He asked us to understand it. If someone does not choose you, there is no need for resentment, no need for blame, and no need to carry bitterness forward. When understanding is present, release happens naturally. You bow inwardly to what was, you thank it for the lessons it offered, and you allow it to pass without pulling it back into your heart. Letting go is not the rejection of love, it is the return to clarity. It is the moment you stop demanding that life give you what it cannot sustain. The Buddha taught that peace appears when the mind no longer struggles with impermanence, but moves with it. What leaves was never meant to be held forever. Walk forward gently, not hardened by loss, and not haunted by hope. Walk with awareness, knowing that your worth was never dependent on being chosen. It was always present, quiet and complete, within you. When you release what does not remain, you make space for a life lived without inner conflict. This is the freedom the Buddha pointed toward, not escape from pain, but freedom from clinging. May your steps be light. May your heart remain open. May you walk the path with dignity, clarity, and peace.